All right, let's we'll begin. I want to welcome everyone. I'm Kevin Stotts, President of Talent 2025, and joining me is Alex Andrews, our Director of Workforce Innovation. And we're excited to have this issue spotlight on the future of work. We'll try to keep this to an hour, but we certainly will stay on if there's questions, comments after the fact. We'd encourage you to really to keep your microphone muted unless you're a speaker. Alex will be monitoring the chat window, so if there's questions, comments, we'll certainly be referring to those, but for the sake of time and the number of people on this, we're going to restrict it to just posting questions or comments in the chat window. Alex and I are really kind of excited about this project. You know, it's been one which kind of in the works for quite a while, and made even more important because of the results and impact of COVID and the disruption to the workforce it's caused as companies have tried to do work with less people because of social distancing and CDC restrictions to really trying to serve customers and do all that they can with a really kind of disrupted labor force that increasingly have some expectation to work at least a portion of their time at home or remotely if their jobs allow for it. So we're really excited to talk about this. The focus is really around what we've done to aggregate a lot of great research on the future of work, and really to try to bring meaning to what does that mean for West Michigan, its employers, its education leaders, its workforce organizations, and the state of Michigan. Are there policies or the strategies that really need to be employed by each stakeholder in order to sort of respond to in a very constructed, planned manner to the future work? And we've got some great employers who give some commentary, and then some education and training providers in terms of how they're responding to the future work. But we're delighted to have this opportunity for this issue spotlight. Well, there you go. There's the agenda, a little bit about the session on our agenda. This issue spotlight is kind of a series of opportunities where we try to kind of do a deep dive and put more time into and more opportunity to discuss issues critical to Talent 2025 and the region with respect to the attraction, retention, and development of talent. And there will be time for Q&A at the end of this presentation. So I'll start with the conclusion of our study, and that is, we often think about employability skills, soft skills. We're going to use the term soft skills in this presentation as being really kind of secondary to technical skills. The education and training we may get at a workforce training organization or 2 or 4 year institution, et cetera. But in reality, these foundational skills are essential to long-term success and resiliency for students, be it a middle school student, a high school, a college student, as well as adults in the workforce. And the data from our aggregation really kind of spells that out in a very compelling way. And so the reaction then is, what do we do with that, and how do we respond in terms of honing these skills within our education systems and our workforce training systems and even within employers? And what we know is true is that having these leads to having a greater competency or proficiency leads to higher wages and greater job stability. And I hope everyone can see my screen. I had a comment in the chat window. So Alex, if you could just make sure you tell me if there's if you're seeing that screen. So from our perspective, what has really kind of come out of that report is automation is inevitable, that the workforce is going to need these skills in order to work alongside and with machines to contextualize the automation and interpret the work that's going on. Education and training must really emphasize these skills because it's the things that can't be automated. And that this idea of front-loading education, and sort of the P through 20 system isn't really going to be effective in the long term for individuals. It has to be lifelong learning and stacking and accumulation of credentials and knowledge in order to sort of stay resilient in this future work environment. And that the workers who are most at risk are really need to be redeployed at scale. And we collectively, employers, education, workforce organizations, the community really have to be thinking about this, because one of the other big trends that we're seeing is the accelerated use of automation and other AI processes, et cetera, as a method to replace workers who cannot be found in the labor market today. We're back to 5% regional unemployment, or about that, kind of approaching that really tight labor market that we had just before COVID, when we were below 4% for the region for unemployment. And so as those low skill jobs get shed, we're going to have an intentional effort to help those individuals who are in those occupations upskill to be competitive. And we think actually, that productivity from automation gains will yield higher wages and greater economic stability for the individuals if we help them make this transition. So what we've really based a lot of our work and research on, and a lot of you are familiar with this, is ONET and its classification of 16 soft skills. Many organizations have kind of looked at this and talk about soft skills and use different terminology or different definitions. We've really gone to ONET because it's a resource of the federal government. It lists and really kind of well defines these, and there's a ton of data that supports and defines what each occupation requires or sort of expects in terms of soft skill, the use of soft skills in those occupations. We're going to send this presentation out after the meeting, and the ONET name at the top is hyperlinked, so it'll take you right to the website that kind of further allows you to get deeper into ONET. But these 16 soft skills are kind of the soft skills individually that we're talking about throughout this presentation. And a lot of these are going to be very familiar, but maybe by a different name than maybe you've seen or used in your organizations. So quickly, automation risks are declining in certain sectors, and what we're seeing is, Michigan, which is really kind of tracking with the rest of the country, is today, or in 1998, where the bottom three states are in 2018, and Michigan in 2018 was where the top three states were in automation. So there's this long, slow progression towards automation that's really almost inevitable, that is going to continue as we look at what those other states have done. Another thing we'll say is that the soft skills, as we know, are really important in those industries or occupations where it's a high human touch, community social services, healthcare, education, training, etc. What we know is a lot of those occupations really have an average of the low risk for automation. Production jobs, as you talked about, automation taking over is going to replace a lot of those low skill occupations, really almost as a necessity of employers because they can't find the talent. And I know there's a lot of you involved in helping employers find talent, and very well sort of the challenge they are finding talent at all skill levels, particularly at the lower skill range. But on the right side of this slide is different occupation groupings, and that diagonal line across is kind of the average in terms of risk for automation. And so those are pretty well defined based on the research from ONET and a lot of other sources. So there's social service occupations, et cetera. We also think that there's a when we know that there's a high correlation between soft skills and average salaries or income. You have mean salary on the left, on the y-axis, and soft skill importance on the right. You have that average for salaries, and you can see this cluster up at the top. The more you have those, some of those industries and occupations going to require more soft skills, and they yield more salaries. So the more you have that competency on those lists of soft skills, the more, not only are you more resilient to automation, but you're gonna make more money in those occupations. And those are just a couple of quick examples. But we know that there's some occupations like community and social services that are high, low risk of automation, but and generally a kind of a lower mean salary than the average. So for some reason, this is kind of a funky slide. I don't know what happened with the graphics here, but what we've really kind of looked at in this presentation and in the study is kind of going from a hierarchical system that we used to have to more of a team approach, where you have executive leadership, consultants, technical support, contracted services, all working towards an objective. Information sort of binding everybody, and automation binding each of the team members into that process. But it's really kind of distributed instead to focus on the function or the objective, and then who are the components in terms of the talent, be it the management, technical knowledge, production, contracted services, that all contribute to whatever business objective that there is. And so that's a brief overview of kind of the insights from our study. Soft skills are really sort of essential for long-term success. They lower the risk of automation. They yield higher salaries. And so now I'd love to have our employer panel sort of talk about this from their perspective. We got Laura Pruce from DeWeiss Manufacturing, Lucas McCotter from ADAC Automotive, and then Brad Hirschbein from the Upjohn Institute, kind of to give an employer's perspective on the data and the research, and kind of what you're seeing within your organizations, and then Brad's work, what he's seeing in his own research for the Upjohn Institute around employer demand and the shift that's occurring with the future of work. So welcome to all of you.
Thank you, glad to be here.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm gonna stop the screen share so that allows you guys to pop up for your for this portion of the conversation. So talk with us, maybe Laura, I'll start with you. Just, you're a smaller size manufacturer, but you've had great and tremendous growth. How have you seen automation play a role within your organization over the last 5 years? And did you see it accelerate in response to COVID? And what do you see for the business in the years to come?
Sure. For DeWeiss, the automation conversation has been long embedded in our strategic plan. Long before COVID actually started, I think when you started to see the influx of people going into manufacturing reducing, we had to make some strategic changes. So what I will say though, while automation has been part of it, it was slower to get probably going. We started with a couple of pieces of machines, but there's always that initial fear from your on-site team members that this is what's coming to replace them, right? So we had to get over that initial conversation of what is automation here to do and how is it helping us to strategically get forward as an organization and leader in an industry. And now it's really embedded into our culture. And now it's part of what our board is requiring of us to talk about in our strategic planning process. And I see our team members very much more excited about the automation. They're engaged in wanting to learn how to program, how to do various technical projects on it. And now it's a sought after position to be an automation technician or to be a manufacturing engineer. These are areas now of our company, and it is much smaller than some, but is becoming one of the occupations that I see people wanting to learn and grow towards in their career pathways here at the company.
That's great. Great. Luke, very large company, a lot of operations across West Michigan and then globally. So maybe you give your perspective on automation and what you were planning and what you've done, and then what the future holds and the impact on your workforce.
Sure. No, I appreciate it. Much like Laura's sentiments, I'd echo it. It's been a conversation that's been ongoing at ADAC for the better part of probably 15 years at this point. But I would probably say within all of our operations, mold, paint, and assembly, 90% of our processes are automated in some way, shape, or form. There is not a program or project that we quote that does not have some robotic feature or some automation of assembly on our floor. And that even goes for how we paint parts, and even our mold presses, how we get parts in and out of the mold is completely automated. Nobody touches those parts until they actually come off the mold conveyor belt. So it's something that we do every day. It's part of our culture. It's part of who we are. How it's impacted us is really, if I think about what our skills that were required to do our jobs probably 10 years ago, it's shifted everything up a level. What a controls engineer used to do 10 years ago, our process techs now do, relative to troubleshooting, editing, and handling some of those problems on the floor. And in reality, we expect our operators at this point to have some level of knowledge around the robots that they work with and the collaborative robots that they work with to be able to point problems out and help the technicians problem solve. This robot was doing this yesterday, now it's doing this. We're missing a point here on one of the pivots, or we need to adjust something. So it's really taken everything that we do and moved it up an entire layer within the organization. So to the point when we hire for people, even at the operator level, we are looking and screening for what is their potential long-term to work alongside with and work with, because it's just a fact of life. There isn't any position on our floor where they're not going to touch a robot or some form of automation day to day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And a quick question, but then a follow-up for the both of you. So, Laura, you kind of talked about this this desire to gain those skills and be part of this exciting movement within the company. How have you seen sort of this issue of soft skills and kind of working in teams instead of just kind of punch in, come in, do your work, and then leave? And do you see that this ascendancy of soft skills kind of paired with technical skills kind of lining up with what you experience day in, day out? And same question for you, Luke.
Absolutely. I think when you think about it, these team members are now the voice of a machine. They need to be able to explain to the next person coming in or to a maintenance technician what might be the issue. They need to be able to explain to a programmer how the program may not be functioning correctly, or even to a sales team, to customers coming in, how does this machine operate and how does it function? Absolutely do. The skills to which those team members working in our automation areas, their ability to talk to one another and communicate effectively is one of the most upmost skills that we are trying to train people to be able to communicate both in written and verbal, through all the email functions, technology. They've got to be able to communicate effectively, or the next person does not understand what it is that they need to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Luke?
Yeah, no, Laura, I think you nailed it again. But in the last probably 2 or 3 years, we've transitioned. I think when automation internally at ADAC was gaining steam, and it was very clear, we were looking to hire a lot of talent in, the controls engineering, electrical engineers, and our technicians. We made it very clear, though, that one of the things that hasn't gone away, to Laura's point, is people still have to be able to communicate. And it no longer was enough to have someone who might be technically skilled up and down. They knew the equipment fantastically, but if they fundamentally couldn't work with the rest of the team, or they couldn't communicate, or they weren't able to describe and share knowledge, that doesn't cut it anymore. And so that they are no longer separate entities. And I think maybe, looked at those things 20 years ago, it might have worked. Somebody could be technically competent, but you just kind of lived with it. If they weren't a real good communicator, they can't be inseparable anymore. Because the one thing that hasn't gone away is you still have to solve problems through people. And we still need people that can have a face-to-face conversation and communicate and cooperate. And that's not that it's a lost art, but it becomes a little harder to find. So we've chosen not to hire people who were flat out technically fantastic, but it wasn't going to be a good fit from a communication perspective. And that makes it a little more difficult, but those are the decisions you have to make, because you can't sacrifice one for the other.
Yeah, makes sense. Brad, you've got really kind of a global view when your role and research at Upjohn. So, comment on the data and sort of our conclusions in the study, and kind of what you're seeing from a macro level from a labor market and labor needs perspective of employers across all industries, not just manufacturing, healthcare, life sciences, software, energy, et cetera.
Sure. I think that Laura and Luke pretty much did nail the head, hit the head on the nail. What we're really seeing is that it's changing, that as automation and technology come about, it's not so much taking away jobs or occupations entirely, it's changing the tasks that they do, and in many cases, the skills needed to do those tasks. And so the nature of work is actually changing. So if you have a production worker, a line worker who is operating a press, now that worker is expected to know CNC programming so that they can operate that machine. It has been that upgrade of skill that Luke mentioned. And so what we're really seeing, and this may vary across many different industries, in manufacturing, there has been clear rollout of industrial robots, particularly manipulable arms and other automated machinery. But we're beginning to see it in hospitals and healthcare settings where one can conduct remote surgery through arms across the country or even the world. But we're seeing it increasingly prevalent in a lot of our day-to-day. We have chatbots for customer service when we're trying to look for help. That's the first tier. If the chatbot generally can't help you, you generally will eventually get kicked up to a human, at least if the company is pretty good with their customer service. We're seeing it customary now for prediction algorithms for retail or entertainment. Would you like to buy more of this? That Amazon reminds you that you're almost out, or that Netflix pioneered in trying to send you the next thing that you might want to watch. But it's broader than that. Even in a lot of office environments across various industries, we have software as a service is increasingly prevalent. You may not think of that as automation, but in many ways it is. Because it's something that IT doesn't have to do, manually install or update a lot of software. That's done in the cloud, it's automatic. That frees up IT's time and effort to do other things, perhaps work on data security. And another great example is that is becoming very prevalent during the pandemic are various apps that were developed to order food even at a restaurant, rather than having a server come and take your order. You order it on your phone, it goes to the kitchen, and someone just brings you your food. And even at Van Andel Arena, that is now reopening, they are rolling this out. You won't actually have to go into the concessions and wait in line. You will order what you want on an app, you'll get a message, and you'll go pick it up when it's ready. So these are all sorts of things that are happening in terms of automation that are changing the tasks that workers do. But as Laura and Luke also pointed out, the research literature is very clear that where the biggest returns are when you have both a combination of cognitive skills, the analytical skills of problem solving or coming up with ideas, melded with interpersonal skills, the teamwork, the communications, the persuasion. You have to have both of those together. The jobs and the people who have those skill sets have increasingly been rewarded. But if you have only one, it's increasingly getting difficult to keep up with wages and have a career progression. And this is true not just at managerial or executive levels, but is increasingly true for rank and file workers as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a couple. It's just so helpful to hear your perspective, Brad. And I think a point of emphasis on what you said was this progression of automation is not in the obvious sectors such as manufacturing. It's across every industry. We had a conversation in another group yesterday on healthcare in a very large hospital system. They're trying to figure it out and have some pilots going on right now. Talk to financial services and accounting firms, and the amount of automations occurring just in terms of the audit process and for companies is scary and astounding. And so it's this it's not going to just affect the low skill, or the dangerous jobs, but it's kind of now sort of the dangerous and the dull jobs
Yeah, if I could just touch on that again, I do want to emphasize the difference between routine and non-routine tasks. And things that computers are good at, algorithms are good at figuring out things that are repetitive, that tend not to change. And so things like accounting, where there are very strict rules to be followed, a lot of those first order processes can now be done by computers. You can run a quick audit check that'll look for discrepancies. But the higher level stuff is figuring out the decisions that are going on in terms of what should be done. Coming up with, say, clever, tax lowering strategies. Those are things where human involvement is often still needed. And so even the job of an accountant, where normally you do have a bachelor's degree, if not a master's degree, some of that task load is being automated, but other tasks are being complemented by the technology. So the job itself is shifting. And if you want to see a really clear example of that, many organizations still have administrative assistants or secretaries, as they used to be called. The nature of that job has changed dramatically over the last 30 or 40 years. No one is taking dictation today. But in terms of keeping track of what's going on and knowing the mechanics of all the business decisions, the admin is the person who keeps track of all it and keeps everyone on task. It is a much more skilled position than it used to be, but we still have that occupation. It just has changed.
Yeah, good. We're almost at the end of our time on this segment. So I'm getting the red flag from Alex. One quick question for Luke and Laura. In terms of the value of soft skills, in terms of in your new work environments, you talked about the emphasis in hiring. How does it also work with an emphasis on talent development? Once you have the folks, within the company, part of the company, you want to invest in them. How are you emphasizing that soft skill development as much as the technical knowledge to give kind of career opportunities within the company?
Yeah, absolutely. I think echoing in some of the past conversation, without these soft skills, the machine is not able to function the way it needs to. You have to have those capabilities in order to make the machine do, and the people around you understand what it needs to do. To continue to emphasize that around here, there's a lot of conversation, a lot of education going into it, whether it being from our training levels that they have to proceed to go through in order to continue on their career path here, whether it's to get into leadership roles, everything internally speaking, down to our review process and our one-on-ones, very much encompasses that communication and how are they communicating, how are others communicating to them, because without that, this company can't run effectively, whether you have automation or not.
Yeah, good. Luke?
Yeah, I guess just real quick from our end, it's been important enough for us that about 18 months ago, we went through a little journey and an exercise where we took the entire organization and we grouped jobs into job families. And each one of those job families is assigned 4 core competencies, and they are all around soft skills. And they are not only part of the review process, but they're required. So if you would have looked at our reviews, or maybe ADAC being an engineering company, we were based around a lot of tactical and a lot of technical achievements as we do, but now more than ever, half of your review and half of your performance, whether you're a salaried engineer or you're an operator on the floor, is based around the soft skills that are assigned to your job family: collaboration, communication, effective learning, those types of things. So We have 16 core competencies that are spread across the organization. And we emphasize them just as much as the soft skills. And in future state, depending on the position you're in, those soft skills, as an executive director, might count for more than technical aptitude as we grow that. So that's the level of importance we're placing on those soft skills. They're not going away. So
yeah. Well, thanks for validating, in your own experience as a company, kind of what we shared in terms of the research and the data. The more you have those, the more, the greater the compensation. So Brad, Laura, and Luke, I really appreciate you kind of diving in and giving us a ton of really good perspective in a short amount of time. So I'm now going to switch over to our educator panel, education training provider panel. So joining us now is Jason Posada with Ottawa Intermediate School District, Angie Barksdale with West Michigan Works, and Amy Mansfield with Davenport University. So welcome to all three of you. It's great to see you. And we know a little bit about, the great work that each of you are doing. So talk about, your reaction to the presentation, the data, and the sort of conclusion of our research. And then what are your organizations, talk about what your organizations are doing on developing soft skills. So let's start with K-12 and Jason. How about if you'd go first, please?
Yeah, so in reaction to your research and your findings, I couldn't agree more. I mean, we know a lot from educational research that soft skills are really, really important indicators of both educational success and life success. We know that from research from Harvard and Chicago that kids that are more proficient in soft skills tend to graduate in higher numbers. They tend to have better life outcomes in terms of employment and not being unemployed. We also know that kids who have stronger soft skills tend to get higher grades and tend to do better in school. So all the outcomes that we want to see overall come through soft skills, even more than through standard grades or standardized tests. So really, we want to see those things flourish even at our youngest grade. So within the Ottawa Area Intermediate School District, and really a collaboration across the region, we have been working to have an aligned system of soft skills, starting in kindergarten, but then going all the way through employment. And really, our journey started with Angie, who for me is right above me, but she might be somewhere else on your screen. A couple of years ago, we collaborated with West Michigan Works to develop the Work Ready curriculum, which is really utilizing the same ONET framework that you presented at the beginning, Kevin, and identifying what skills do employers really want to have here in West Michigan, and how can we have a really structured curriculum and process to make sure that job seekers and current employees have those skills overall. So West Michigan Works is working on that right now, and Angie will talk about that in a second, I'm sure. Currently within kind of the K-12 space, we've developed what we're calling Skill Sense, which is a progression of skills that begins in kindergarten and goes all the way through high school, and really helps teachers and schools and districts understand, how do I talk about these skills? How do I structure them? And then how do I scaffold the learning of these skills so kids gain proficiency in these skills over time in a really meaningful and structured way. So I'm really excited about that work and how it's kind of progressing across the region.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Jason, in Ottawa has been an innovator in many areas of education, and thanks to you and others in the Ottawa team. So really fascinating to hear the benefit in terms of educational outcome, even outweighing some of the other more standard things we try to put into education. But that development of those soft skills, you're a better student and you're a better person as those skills get developed. So I'm going to move along the K-12 continuum and go to Amy now. So from a higher ed perspective, what's Davenport doing? I mean, you've got this really neat balance between the traditional student and the non-traditional student kind of coming in and getting some additional knowledge and skill to sort of advance their career. Talk about your reaction to the first part of the presentation, and then what Davenport is doing.
Yeah, so absolutely. I don't think there's an educator or a workforce industry member or, everyone is going to agree that soft skills are extremely important. Furthermore, I think we've been doing this work already. We just haven't formalized it. And so how do we formalize it? And from Davenport's perspective, how do we let our students have a transcripted soft skill or employability skill so that an employer can see the education that they've gone through? I mean, we have always been embedding soft skills into our courses, right? So Davenport actually last year, we did a soft rollout. We call it our excellence system. And it consists of 9 competencies. So global, intercultural competency, civil and social responsibility, ethical reasoning and action, critical and creative thinking, analysis and problem solving, leadership and teamwork, information and technology proficiency, written communication, as well as professional communication. And so those are our 9 competencies. Now, what we're doing with those is we're actually earmarking our normal courses. So an accounting course, right? We talked about accounting. I think Brad talked about accounting a little bit. So we're earmarking our accounting 201 course, and we're saying this course is going to cover these competencies. And students can then go in and select that specific course, and they can do their projects, and a faculty member will grade their projects on whatever competency is listed for that course. Upon completion, successful completion of the evaluation of their projects, it's actually going to be transcripted next to that accounting 201. So students can have kind of the proof of the pudding, so to speak, in terms of, yes, it's kind of like getting your I voted sticker, right? We all wear them proudly because we want everybody to know we voted. Well, how do we formalize that when it comes to soft skills? So, we just did a soft rollout of that. Of course, it was in the middle of the pandemic, but we're excited now to really offer more programs with those competencies baked into them. So for fall of 21, we're going to do computer science, computer information systems, health information management, legal studies, human resource management, and biological lab sciences. And the thought is, we start small, right? Because this is a lot of work, but eventually every program in the university will have the opportunity for students to earn that credential in all of those competencies. They'll get a little certificate, it'll be transcripted, they get a letter from the president, those types of things. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. And it's really quite exciting because, what we all, you hear, you talk to higher education leaders, and they'll say, well, that's what you get in a liberal arts education is these soft skills. And we all did. I mean, I think all of us on the panel, et cetera, all went to some sort of post-secondary education. But putting the structure, putting the rigor, and then communicating the value to the student is really important. And then I thought the selection of the occupations, a lot of technical occupations paired with the soft skills, going back to kind of sort of analogy to what Luke and Laura were talking about. They need those soft skills with the technical knowledge, and kind of very interesting to hear what occupations or what programs you've selected first for the pilot. So kudos to you and Davenport. So Angie, shifting over to the workforce, and we would say typically someone out beyond the sort of the P through 20 pipelines, that out in the workforce maybe find themselves out of work or maybe needing to kind of make a shift, unemployed, et cetera. Talk about what West Michigan Works is doing, because you guys are a leader kind of in piloting this type of work too.
Yeah. So employability skills or soft skills, or whatever terminology you want to use, has been an issue that we've identified as a growing need for employers for many, many years. And the struggle we've had is finding a program or a system or a curriculum that would meet the needs of a wide range of people, right? So for many years, we were using a curriculum that was purchased. It was costly, so we couldn't do it in scale. We used it for individual special projects. So that's where we partnered up with Jason, as he mentioned, and did a great job of, greasing the wheels for me. We wanted to identify, we had three things we were looking for in a program. One, it needed to be affordable for us to scale across many people, many walks of life, many programs. We wanted a pre-assessment and a post-assessment because, knowing that we're federally and state funded, our programs typically have a lot of hoops to jump through. And we are not about putting more hoops in front of people. We wanted something that met the person where they were at instead of a hurdle that they had to get through to get to the end of our programming, right? So something that was meaningful for them, not just another task to do. And we wanted it to be based on our local West Michigan employers' needs. So when Jason worked with a team of curriculum developers over our region to put this together, they went out to all 7 of our counties and got feedback from all kinds of employers to really hone in what are those skills that are truly needed by our local employers, right? We could sit here in a room and identify all of them and come up with some really great ones, but what rose to the top for our employers? So our curriculum is based around 9 modules, and it's a module-based curriculum. So an individual takes the pre-assessment, and then we identify which modules they need, right? We're not going to force them to go through all 9 if they only need 1 around responsibility. And then there's a post-test at the end to kind of show that they've learned that competency. Our philosophy is we can guarantee to an employer that they know what it means to have all of those 9 skill sets. I can't guarantee they're going to do it, right? That's the human nature of the world, right? So when they get done and they pass their post-assessment, they get a work-ready certificate. So we've embedded this in any of our programs. Anybody who's enrolling in any of the programs where we're providing career coaching, which also really walks people through their career pathway and really developing some of these soft skills and helping them understand where they're needed in their pathway. As well as we're offering it to the public, and some employers are taking advantage of it, using it as an onboarding or skill that they're providing to their incumbent workforce. So, so far so good. We've been doing the program for about 1.5 years, 2 years now. So getting some good feedback and some good data on it.
Good. Well, and it's certainly a need, but there's new processes have to be developed, and you guys are leading that, and it's great that there's the cooperation sort of alignment between by partnering with the work of Jason and the individualization. So an adult doesn't waste time acquiring a skill they already have, so that they can kind of skip over and focus on maybe sort of the gaps that they have. Love to just get some. So as you make this shift, how has the reaction been within your institutions, organizations, and those you're working day out, either the learner or your colleagues, or just kind of the the degree of difficulty with making this shift? So Amy, we'll start with you. We'll kind of and go to Jason and then back to Angie.
Well, I'm told that there hasn't been a hard sell for this. But keep in mind, folks, this is the end of my 7th week at Davenport. So, I wasn't on the implementation of this. But students are really liking the idea of having that additional credential, if you will, on their transcript. I think we need to do some more marketing. We need to, like I said, it was a soft rollout. So admittedly, there were a few other higher priority things last year that we all were dealing with. But, I think we need to take the strategic step in terms of moving forward, both in terms of what programs do we expand this to in the academic year 22-23. But also, how do we promote this more readily to students and make sure that our employer partners know about it as well, I think is a key strategic conversation that we need to have. But to my knowledge, this has been really nicely rolled out, just wasn't in terms of, you know, extreme high priority marketing, et cetera, last year during the pandemic.
Yeah, understandable, understandable. Jason?
So soft skills or employability skills or social emotional skills, however you might term it, have always been a core component of K-12. So I think like the sell job or people buying into this, I think is people pretty readily in the K-12 space understand the need for developing these skills. And I think, as Amy said, she hit it right, you know, right on the head. We already do this work kind of naturally within the educational space. I think the problem comes in the fact that because we already do the work and because it's already a part of what we do, sometimes we don't go through the really intentional practice like Davenport did of really examining how do we kind of cultivate these skills? How do we name them? How do we make sure kids have actual proficiency in these? How do we make sure that they can talk about these in future situations like interviews or times when they need to kind of showcase these different things? So being really intentional about seeing how these skills kind of stack up over time and how we're intentionally developing these things, I think is the biggest roadblock really for us within the kind of the K-12 space. Because again, we do these things already, but how intentional we are and how kind of how we scaffold things over time, that there's still some questions to be answered around that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Angie?
Yeah, I would echo what Amy and Jason have said. You know, this is work that's really been happening in all of our spaces for many, many years, but it's not been packaged like we've talked about, right? I think, and I don't think there's a need to market or sell it within our institutions. I think where our challenge comes is in the public, right? The public space. Employability skills, soft skills in the public forum is squishy, right? It's not a tangible thing like a certificate, a degree. I got my bachelor's degree or I got my CNC certification. Those things the public know about and they know how to sell it. They know that that's the checkbox I need to apply for this job. But to get the general public to understand the importance of this and what it does and how it opens their doors is, I think, our biggest challenge, right? And I think the other part of that challenge is helping people understand how that career pathway is impacted by having these different skill sets. Mm-hmm. We all know it. We've all just talked about it. The employers have talked about it. We've talked about it, how having these things are imperative, whatever these different 9 or 16 or whatever those core soft skills are imperative to move up the ladder to different careers, to different, more responsibility. How to get the public to understand the importance of this is, I think, what our challenge is, right? Mm-hmm. We know it, employers know it, but the general public, on the other hand, doesn't really understand the importance.
Yeah. Very, very good point. And because it's also tied to the economic risk of individuals too. Final comment, then we're going to kind of transition and give an opportunity for some questions, is that I've heard it said by a few in the state of Michigan in my work on education issues that you can't measure soft skills, but all 3 of you have developed methods to measure and assess those soft skills. And it, in some ways, it's kind of no different than how you accumulate or measure knowledge of a subject matter that you would then get a degree for at Davenport, or you'd show, competency in a class in high school, et cetera. So really exciting, because it's showing that, I think, is going to be essential to the adoption and sort of providing that structure and rigor that then kind of goes along with the emphasis to individuals that they need to put an emphasis on this as much as technical knowledge. So we've got a few minutes left. I want to just open it up. Anybody participating in this call, and also comments, final comments, et cetera, from any and all of you. So while we're waiting for a comment or a hand to be raised, anything that any of you would like to say as we hope to have some comment in. So Amy, I see your hand up.
I'd like to ask a question of Luke, if I may. As you're changing your jobs to job families Is it changing your job postings to really place more emphasis on these employability skills?
Yeah, I would say it definitely does. At the same time that we've done that, we've made an effort to go through and rewrite every single job description that we have to reflect those. So if you look at our postings, there's certainly your essential responsibilities, but there also are essential skills listed on all of our jobs. So those soft skills are just as paramount and prevalent on our postings as what maybe the technical skills might be, and they're going to be those competencies that we've outlined throughout the organization. So we've tried to have that reflect. I'm not going to make any promises that they're 1,000% perfect, but we've at least attempted to go back and redo that. So hopefully it reflects what we intend to hire for in that job, not just on the technical side.
Good. Angie?
Yeah, another initiative that we have partnered with Kevin and the Kellogg Foundation and the DeVos Foundation around is our Higher Reach initiative. And I bring that up because what happens in the Higher Reach process, or the evidence-based selection process, is helping employers understand the skills and abilities needed for the position. And we go through a very detailed job analysis using ONET, so employers can really look at, as Luke just talked about, the core competencies of what's needed in that position. So you're not using the job description that we've had for the last 25 years that says prefer a bachelor's degree, but do you really need a bachelor's degree, right? So it goes through a technical process of analyzing the job and doing some interviewing with subject matter experts. So individuals who may be doing the job in your organization for the last 5 or 10 years who are high performers, and vetting that job analysis with them. So then as an employer, when you go to do your hiring, you have a really good idea of what you're looking for. So you can make a better hire. And it's built on this ONET and all of the skills and abilities that we're using in these soft skills programs as well.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Just the synergy and alignment that's now, I think, being intentionally done is really quite exciting. So exciting new development and resource for employers too. Alex, I didn't see any more questions in the chat window or comments, but open it up to anybody who wants to ask a question. Everyone's shy. Might be the lunch hour.
I have a comment if no one else has a question.
I was going to go to you next.
So one thing that I think many of us are quite well aware of is that there's been a lot of wage pressure for the past few months as the economy has reopened up. Everyone is both posting for jobs. Many people are searching for jobs. There's just a lot of wage pressure as you try to attract them. And one of the things that we should be concerned about, I think collectively, is that generally if a lot of the labor is going to get more expensive, it's also going to increase the pressure to look for more of that labor-saving technology, for more of the automation, unless workers can have their skills improved to work with that technology and adapt quickly enough. So all of what we've talked about in terms of greater investment, both in the soft skills, the interpersonal skills, but also combined with the technical skills, that is going to become ever more imperative to help a lot of the workers and the businesses out. So I think that's one thing that we should be very cognizant of going forward.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, great point, Brett. And so then as companies automate because of the wage pressure for those lower skill jobs, it should lead to greater productivity and process, et cetera. But that productivity also translates to higher wages for the remaining workforce because there's higher value placed on those individuals working with and alongside machines and that automation.
If they have the skills.
Yeah, if they have the skills. Yeah, great point. Good. All right. Alex, how are we doing? Did any final points that you want to make or highlight before I kind of run through our conclusion?
No, this has been great. Thank you all for being panelists.
Yeah. So I'm going to just close things out with Again, reiterating some of what I talked about at the beginning and what was in our report is this transformation, automation is in the workplace is going to take time, but it is happening now. Soft skills should be valued in terms of development as much as technical skills, and heard it from our employer panel and our educator panel. That is one, true, and it's also two, being done by our education workforce leaders. That these transferable skills lead to job stability, increased pay, greater career agility. So this is a long-term benefit to the individual. But making this shift and then putting value and then developing these skills amongst those who really need some support is really going to be sort of a community goal, a multi-sector goal, and from the perspective of employers, education, and then training organizations. Finally, the detail of and everything in our report is available on our website at that hyperlink. A lot of rich interactive information that's available to you. We actually use Tableau. Alex did a great job of putting this information in Tableau to be able to sort of play around with the dial, so to speak, with the data and get maybe some insight that's important to your organization. And then if you have further questions, you can always reach out to Alex Andrews, who really sort of led this project and this research for us. And this contact information is there. So we'll be sharing this PowerPoint presentation and a link to the video for anyone who wants to go back or share it. But thank you all for your time today, and wish you a very safe and relaxing weekend as we close out, get closer to closing out Friday. So thank you so much. And then thank you also for our panelists. Really appreciate your time. So thanks for all you're doing on this issue. Goodbye.
Thank you.